Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Okay, so for the materials today, we're going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 canvas. You can get this at any of your local craft stores or online, and you can certainly switch up the size, but that's the size I'm using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. The colors I'm using is fire red, this is a chrome orange, ultramarine blue, titanium white, green oxide, chrome yellow, burnt umber, and Mars black. And of course you can switch up those colors, but that's what I'm using. I'm going to be using only 3 brushes today. The brushes I'm using is a number 10 round brush, a 1/2 inch bristle brush, and a 1 inch wide bristle brush. And I also am going to have a cup of water for washing my brushes and a paper towel for drying my brushes. And then if you'd like, I will also be uploading a picture of the painting that you can certainly download and print to use while you're going through the painting process as well. That's all you're going to need. Okay, so for the first step, we're going to be using the large 1 inch wide. It's a bristle brush 1 inch wide. It's actually a number 12, but it's just 1 inch wide. I'm going to be using blue and white to paint my sky. And I'm going to be using a circular motion. You could certainly go left to right if you wanted to, but for me, doing this particular sky that I'm doing, the circular motion is going to help me to emulate clouds. I'm going to, when I'm picking up my paint, I will be alternating kind of the quantity of the blue to white. So maybe right now I'm using a little bit more blue, and you can see I'm kind of doing some various areas with the darker blue. Now I'm just picking up white, and I'm continuing to do these circles, which is going to allow me to have that almost fluffy edges to the colors, and it allows me to blend them in pretty well also. And I am going to be coming down pretty far on my canvas, and I'm going to allow for a few inches at the bottom of my canvas to be unpainted, which is going to preserve some space for my ground. And also, as I'm coming down this sky, I'll be getting lighter and lighter, which means I'm going to be using more white on my brush. That way, if you were to go outside and look at the sky and just kind of analyze it, most skies are going to get lighter and lighter as they come down towards that horizon. So that's what I'm going to try and emulate here, so it has a pretty natural feel to it. You could also incorporate some warmer colors. You could put maybe a little brown as it goes down towards the horizon line. But for me, I'm just going to be using primarily blue and white for simplicity purposes. And for this particular painting, the star of the show is not really the sky. It's more the tree that we're going to be putting on in a little while. And as this paint is drying, you'll see I'm kind of skipping around my sky, and I'm getting these colors to, as they're drying, I like to kind of keep working them so they have these softer edges and they blend in with the colors next to them. I am going to kind of cut myself off here so I don't go much farther than that. So I just kind of gave myself a line, which allows me to visually know where to stop. And that's just maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches away from the bottom of the canvas. And I'm almost done wrapping up on this sky. You could certainly add more clouds. You could make some darker areas, or you could make it all really, really light. But whatever is visually appealing to you, it could be nice and smooth and solid, but if you can get some sort of gradient that makes it a little bit lighter down towards that horizon, that's where it's going to look its most natural. And I think I'm going to call it on this step. I'm pretty much digging this sky. For the next step, you will be using this large brush. So as you wrap up the sky, you can just wash and dry this larger brush and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. I'm going to be painting the grass or the ground. I'm going to be using 4 colors. I'm going to be using yellow, green, brown, and white, and I'm going to use them in that order. I will not wash my brush. I'm going to pick up some yellow, and for me, I'm using my brush kind of the vertical or the horizontal way to kind of get these chaotic little stripes on here. And this way, this is going to kind of lay the groundwork. I'm going to get these colors to blend in, but just adding this yellow first allows me to not have to wash my brush, because I'm going right from yellow to green. So now I'm doing some chaotic green stripes. Now I'm going to pick up some brown. I'm going to do some chaotic brown stripes. And then without washing my brush, I'm going to pick up white, and I'm going to switch the direction of my brush, and now I'm going to be using it in the vertical fashion. And with that white, I'm going to gently blend in all of this grass. And what's going to happen is it's going to provide you with a really natural tone to this. And because it is a landscape, we do not need a really clean top line to it, because we're going to be putting a tree line back there. So don't worry if this top line isn't super straight. And I'm not using a lot of pressure. That way I can get this nice, really like smooth look. It doesn't have to go straight across. You can have a little bit of a bend to it if you want it to look like there's a little bit of a hill or something rolling down. And I'm not going to overwork it. If you keep blending, it will end up one solid color. So if you like the variations in colors and you've got it blended pretty well, you can stop. Because sometimes if you overwork an area, it gets a little bit too much. So that's all I'm going to do for the ground area, and I'm going to use that smaller bristle brush for the next step. So when you're done with this, you can put this away in your water cup and get ready with the 1/2 inch bristle brush. All right, so what I'm going to be doing for the next step is I'm going to do my first layer of my back trees. I'm going to be using this smaller bristle brush because I like it for making these like dot marks or stippling with it. And it's going to provide some good texture for these trees. The colors I'm going to be using are brown and black. And the reason why I'm going to be using these colors is because I want them to act as like a shadow underneath the vibrant colors that I'm going to be putting later. So the goal here is I want to have uneven treetops. You can make them as high or as low as you want, but wherever you decide you want your main tree to be, you want those back trees to be short. So that way they don't take away from the focal point, which is going to be that main tree. So I'm going to first lay these out with brown and black, and after I get done dotting them on, I'm going to put a smooth bottom edge where they meet the grass. So first, like I said, I'm just kind of laying them in whatever kind of assorted order I want, but you can see that I'm leaving the tops of them kind of messy, and you don't need to dot it 100%. It can certainly have little peek throughs of white because we're going to be doing another layer on them later. So don't feel the need to dot it 100%. This is just merely acting as like a shadow that's going to be underlying the trees that we're going to be putting, or the colored part that we're going to be putting on later. So again, you can just kind of dot these on in semi-chaotic fashion. And when you get down to the bottom, I've got the whole row kind of in here. Now what I'm going to do, I want to make it meet that grass in a more gentle fashion. So I'm just kind of moving my brush left to right, so there's not a distinct line per se that is happening, but you definitely get the idea that they're coming together in a more subtle fashion than those rough dots that would be created by this stippling type brush stroke. And then when you're all set with this step, we're going to be switching brushes to your round brush. So when you've got these laid out, in a way that you like. You can put this bristle brush away in your water cup and take out the small round brush that you have. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing for the next step is I am putting in my tree trunk and my branches. The colors that I'm going to be using are predominantly brown or black, but I will also be using brown and white and perhaps a little orange on the trunk to make it look like it's got some bark to it. But I'm going to start with black paint. So I'm using my small round brush. How I'm going to decide where I place this tree, for me, I'm going to put it about a third of the way over to the right and about halfway up or halfway down my grass. So that's where my trunk is going to start. This is a big ass tree. It's huge. So it's going to take up the majority of my canvas. It's a maple tree. So the maple tree kind of has a nice sturdy trunk, and then the branches really, they expand out pretty far. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of start my trunk. I know I want it here. If you're running into wet paint underneath, which I am, don't worry about it. You just work it right into that black paint. It'll add a nice look to it. When you're painting tree branches, the trick to getting them to look pretty realistic is think of it as you need those sturdy older branches that are the first ones that were created on that tree as your base. So all branches will start out small when they're born and then they grow bigger. So I have these big branches that are like the sturdy older ones, and then I'll have smaller branches coming off of them. So when I'm doing the big branches, I'm pushing hard with my brush and I have a lot of paint on my brush. This is going to provide me with these big sturdy branches that will then have some smaller ones coming off of them. But I start with my big branches. I do not like my trees to be super straight like a landscaper just came and pruned them all. So I do tend to make some areas stick out farther than others. And that way, again, to me, it makes it look a little bit more natural. And you do want to make sure that you cross branches over one another. They don't all have to occupy their own space. So just know as you're doing this that the more you get these branches to kind of intermingle with each other, the more natural the tree is going to look also. And then when you start to get towards your smaller branches, I'm still kind of working on my sturdy ones right now. When you start to work on your smaller branches, you can do a couple of different things. One, you can water down your black paint a little bit. That's going to provide you with almost like an ink consistency to your paint, and it will help you to make those skinnier branches. Another tip is to not push hard. So you want to have a lot of paint on your brush and don't push hard. That will allow you to have these skinnier branches. Another tip is don't make them into a straight line. You want them to have a little bit of wiggle to them. They can even at times look like they're broken, because that's definitely what happens in a real tree. And this particular tree doesn't matter as much for this next little tip I'm going to give you, but if you are going to have the tips of the branches visible, you want to let off on your pressure as you're going towards the little tip of the branch. But this, again, this particular tree doesn't matter. That tip doesn't matter as much because you're going to have so many leaves on this tree that it's going to hide the edges anyways. But right now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of filling up my the interior of this tree with a whole bunch of little branches, and you can see I'm kind of working my way from I sometimes start on the outside and work my way in. It's okay if you don't connect all of your branches, because again, you're going to be hiding a lot of this with leaves. So don't be too terribly concerned if it's not perfectly executed and you have some rogue branches here and there that are not touching anything. But definitely the more branches you can get on there, even if you have like these little tiny ones in between, that it will help to make the tree look a lot more natural. But you can see I've got mine kind of coming over here, but because it's tall up here, it's weighted properly. You don't want your tree to look like it's too heavy on one side and it's going to fall over. And you do want to make sure that main area is kind of on the straighter side. But once you have that black on there, now you can start adding colors to your trunk. I just picked up brown and white without washing my brush, and I'm just almost wiggling my brush on that trunk. I don't really care about the interior branches because hardly any of those are gonna be a focal point. I am now just picking up a little bit of orange, so that way I've got an additional color to the trunk. I might later add some other colors just to make it pop out a little bit more, but you may find once you get the leaves on that you're not even really terribly concerned about that trunk anymore, because the leaves are such a predominant piece to this painting that things like the trunk become almost just background noise and you don't even really notice them at the end. But I think I'm digging this, so I might just add just a touch more orange in through here because I'm liking how that's looking. And then when you're all set with this particular step, we're going to switch brushes back to the large bristle brush. So when you're all done getting your tree trunk and your branches, you can put this small brush away in your, it's so hard to stop. You can put the small brush away in your water cup and take out the large bristle brush for the next step. Okay, so the next step that we're going to be doing is the shadow underneath our tree. I am going to be using primarily brown, but I'll probably use a little bit of black, and if I need to, I can use a little bit of green as well. I'm going to use my large bristle brush. I really made sure this was pretty dry because I'm going to be using a dry brush technique. The key to doing this is you want to use very little paint and don't push too hard. So I'm going to use a little bit of brown with maybe just a touch of black. I'm using so little paint, I'm going to wipe it off on my palette. I can always add more, but it's really hard to take away. I want to start at the bottom of the tree, and you can really put this shadow anywhere you want, because nobody, if you're doing the sky similar to mine, you can't really tell where the sun is. So wherever you put the shadow is going to indicate to the viewer where the sun is. So if I put my shadow over to the left, it's going to indicate that the sun's over here. If I put my shadow this way, it's going to indicate that the sun's over here. If I just put a big mass of shadow underneath the tree, it tells the viewer that the sun is here. So whatever you decide works. I've got a little bit of brown and black on my brush. And for me, I like to put a lot of shadow underneath this particular tree because I'm going to be dropping leaves on the ground. And this darkness underneath helps to almost make those leaves pop out a little bit more. So I've got very little bit of paint on my brush, and I'm going to just kind of make the edges of the shadow pretty messy. I want to disguise the bottom of my tree so it doesn't look like the tree's just stuck into the ground. And I'm just kind of brushing it out so it has these softer edges, because maybe this shadow is being created you know, from the whole top of the tree, and there's going to be spots coming through the leaves, so you might have some light spots and some dark spots, so it doesn't have to be a solid color. And the idea of a shadow is it's just a little bit, it's darker than the surface it's on top of. So it doesn't have to be totally black. It can be brown with little peek-throughs of the grass underneath. And that's all I'm going to do for this step. But the next step, I will be using the smaller bristle brush. So when you get done with this, you can put the large bristle brush in your water cup, wash the small one, and get ready for the next step. All right, so on to the next step. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting the colors on these background trees. I'm using my 1/2 inch bristle brush. For colors, I'm going to use all of my colors except for blue and black. So I'm going to use white, yellow, green, red, orange, and brown. And the reason I'm using so many colors is because when I look out into an autumn landscape and I see trees off in the distance, they're all different kinds of colors. So that's why I'm going to use a lot of these. The only trick here is you want the tops of the trees to be lighter than the bottom of the trees. And you don't want this to be so bright that it takes away from the focal point of this front tree that we're going to be doing. So I'm going to use more subtle tones. I'm not going to use a ton of white, but I will definitely concentrate on having it lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. So I'm going to start with some red, and I'm just going to kind of pick a couple of trees that I want to be red, and I will at some aspects go outside of my original shadowed area. That way it's going to give me a couple of extra bright pieces on the edges. I'm going to do a couple of these with red. I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm just going into orange now, and then I'm going to pick a couple of spots I want for orange. And you don't just have to have them at the tops. You can have little bushes in front of a back tree. So you can really get creative. I'm not, again, not washing my brush. I'm going to pick up some green. Now I'm going to add some green onto this tree back here because I have the little specks of orange left on my brush from the last color I chose. This is providing a nice little variation. Or you could get wild and crazy and pick up green and orange at the same time and put it on your red tree. So just know this is a creative process. It does not have to be anything exact. I'm now picking up a little bit of white, or excuse me, that wasn't white, that was yellow. A little bit of yellow and dotting in some yellow. You might have noticed I haven't picked up white yet. I am definitely reserving that for my last color that I use. And the reason being is I don't want to wash my brush, and as soon as I put white on my brush, it's going to start to muddle everything. So without using the white for these initial colors, I'm getting some nice vibrancy, but I'm not dulling them down. And they're being nice and translucent, so they're going to see that shadowy black behind it. But right now I feel like I've got a good assortment of colors. Ooh, I want to use brown a little bit too. I've got a good assortment of colors going on right now, so I'm just about ready to start tapping into the white. And when I do the white, I did not wash my brush again. I'm just going to use a very tiny bit on the tip of my brush. I'm going to wipe it off on the side of my palette. And I'm really just going to kind of lightly dab it on to almost just provide these little peaks of highlights throughout the tips of the trees. Or if I want like an extra little bush in front, I can almost just lead the viewer to see the top of it by adding that little bit of highlight. It's almost just like guiding the eye to see the edge of that particular structure or bush or tree or whatever you're trying to emulate here. And then that's all I'm going to do for this step. But I will, and you can see I'm doing these like little fluffy edges too. That's going to provide a really nice soft look to these trees back here. But I am going to be using the same brush for the next step if I can ever stop painting these ones. So when you're all set with this, you're going to wash and dry this bristle brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so here comes the fun step. We're going to be adding the leaves on the tree. I will be using all the colors on my palette except for blue. How I do this is I'm going to be using this the smaller bristle brush, and I'm going to be doing the same type of technique I was doing for back here. I'm going to be dotting. How how I do it is I'm going to be working from the dark to the light. So I'm going to start out with black, and I'm going to make myself some, again, kind of shadowy areas. I don't want to overwhelm the painting with a whole bunch of massive black areas. So this is just kind of a strategic step, so you will definitely have some nice dimension to the tree. Once I get my black done, now I'm going right into brown. And again, same idea. This is to work on the dimension of the tree. You want to have like little clusters of almost like clumps of leaves. You don't want them to all look like cotton balls per se, but this type of clustering formation is very reminiscent of this particular type of tree. And when the leaves start to fall, you see through the tree. You'll see spots through the tree. So this is going to help to make this tree look like that autumn maple tree that we're trying to get it to look like. And again, you can see I'm kind of keeping with this kind of not perfect shape that I started with, just to kind of keep it so it doesn't look like that landscaper came in and trimmed it before we started to paint it. So now I've got my brown, so I'm going to progressively get lighter, and to me the next lighter color is green. You could have a just autumn color palette for this, which would make it look pretty spectacular as well. And in order to do that, you would kind of eliminate the green. The green is going to bring it more into maybe late summer as opposed to just straight autumn. But this is what I see out my studio window, so this is what you get to paint. And don't forget, you can go right over branches. It doesn't have to be just strictly at the end, at the tip of every branch. Then you can see I'm being pretty strategic with where I'm placing these. I'm not going hog wild and painting the entire thing, but I am definitely making sure I get a good representation of this green pretty much everywhere, but not too overwhelming. And then again, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm going straight into the red, which to me is the next brightest color. And again, I'm going to be making some, decisions as to where I'm placing this red, and it's not going to go everywhere, but it is definitely going to be represented well over the entire tree. I don't know if I've seen many trees that have just like red on one side or just yellow on one side. I'm sure they're out there, but to me they usually have kind of like an equal distribution over the entire tree. But again, it doesn't cover the whole tree. I still am seeing peaks of brown. I'm still seeing the peaks of green and the black as well, which definitely add to the depth perception and the depth illusion here. And I'm still doing kind of little clumps. And again, I'm not washing my brush, but I'm going into that next lighter color, which is orange. If you do feel like you're getting too muddled, like the colors are almost blending too much, then it may be time for you to wash and dry your brush. If you had a lot of black on your brush initially and it doesn't seem like you're able to get any color to come out that doesn't have a hint of black, then maybe it's time to wash and dry the brush. But for me, I am able to kind of control the quantity on my brush, so I don't seem to have an issue with that, which is why you don't find me washing my brush too often. But I am, using this orange strategically like I was doing all the other colors. Now you can see I'm kind of spreading out my footprint, so to speak, of these leaves. They're going a little bit farther out. I'm crossing over those branches a little bit more. So this way it's making it look a little bit more fluffier and lively because the orange is kind of by itself without any of the other colors behind it in some places. That's going to add to the vibrancy of it. And we've got a couple more colors to go on this tree. But at any time as you're painting, if you feel like you need to get a better look of it, you can always just kind of step back, take a couple of steps back, you know, behind the painting, look at it from a distance. Sometimes that helps to guide you in, you know, where you want to place things. The next color I'm going into is yellow. Now the trick with yellow is it is very translucent. So if you're doing it and you're like, "Ooh, this isn't bright enough. I can see right through it. It's not working out for me." Then you should use white with it. The white is going to help it be not so translucent, and it'll allow it to be more vibrant, and give you that more sunshine kind of look to it. So again, if your yellow is too see-through for you, just use it with a little bit of white, and that's going to help you with that. And I just have one more color, and it's going to be straight on white. So once you get a little bit of this yellow on here, then what I suggest you do is you're going to use just white, again, not washing the brush, and this is going to be those beautiful little highlights that you're going to use on the edges, and this is going to really make this tree come to life, and make a lot of this just pop and be very, very beautiful. You can, you know, pre-mix colors and make some peach colors, but I really like these super vibrant colors, and you can see I'm getting this white to kind of go past these edges, make myself a couple of little bright clusters, and then we really have, I think, maybe one or two more steps. I'm digging the way that my tree's coming out right now. So at this point, I'm going to put this large brush away. We're going to use that small pointy brush for the next step. So when your leaves are all done, put this big brush away and get your small round brush out for the next step. All right, so what we're going to be doing for the next step is we're going to put the leaves that have fallen onto the ground. So theoretically, these should be the same colors as the leaves that are in the tree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all the colors on my palette except for blue, because that's what I did for the leaves in the tree. And this is going to be a simple, messy polka dot kind of style. So I just started with black, and I'm going to make myself a whole bunch of messy black dots. They can go on top of your shadow. They can go outside of your shadow. The leaves do not care where your shadow was. So you can have a couple of rogue ones coming out the side. And then I'm just going to progressively get lighter. That black and this brown that I'm using right now are meant to act as shadows. So as I'm going through, I'm kind of leaving them or putting them in a similar spot to just build these light colors from the dark. I'm not super systematic with my dots. The next color I'm going into is green because that's what I did up top. And now I'm making a whole bunch of messy green dots. I go fast. I just dot away. Sometimes I dot hard. Sometimes I dot light. Sometimes I'll put little clusters. It doesn't really matter because they're gonna, you want them to look as if somebody didn't think about putting them there. And that's why I do this while I talk. Because when I talk, I'm not really paying too much attention to how I'm making these leaves fall on the ground. I am kind of spreading them out in almost like a vertical or a horizontal fashion, left to right. You could pile them up if you wanted to. You could have like a little cute pile of leaves anywhere you want to. Right now I've got red on my brush, and I do want to kind of make it so that I don't have exactly the same number of green as I do red over here. So I do, you know, consciously put little clusters on the ground like this. Like right now I'm in orange, but I won't put 3 orange dots, like I have 3 red dots there. So, you know, you want to, again, not think about it too hard. Just kind of dot away. Maybe you don't even look at it when you dot it. Maybe you just kind of look off into the distance or whatever. Yellow, I know I'm going to need some yellow with white if I want this to be more visible. My white is pretty visible there, so I just add a little bit more yellow to my brush. Make sure you put some in your shadow area. You can make them, you know, small or larger, whatever you want to do. It's totally carefree when you're doing a step like this because it's, you know, designed to just look like it happened. I've had a couple of people put their leaves falling from the sky or falling from the tree, so they're almost like mid-air, which looks pretty cool. And then that's kind of it. So after this step, we have that one final step that you need in every good painting. It'll be done with a small brush. So once you get your leaves to fall on the ground, you can wash and dry the small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so the last step to any good painting is to sign it. So for this one, I usually sign mine in bottom left, bottom right, but I'm gonna sign this one in the bottom right. I'm gonna be using black paint with my small brush. I don't know if my wine glass is in your way. Let me move that for you. I'm gonna do my initials. You could do your last name, you could do the date, you could do your first name, whatever works for you is fine by me. That's your own identifying mark. And that's going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting with you again sometime.